Well, hi. Welcome to Commit to You, specifically for parents. Thank you so much for joining me here today. So what are we going to do here today? So the purpose of this program is to kind of talk about parenting. And, parenting is such a privilege. Like, how lucky are we if we wanted children and we get the privilege of, growing children and spending time with them and seeing them develop. And at the same time, if you're a parent, you also know how challenging it can be at times. It's definitely not easy. I feel like, growing up, you have all these thoughts about adulthood, and then you're just an adult. And then you realize, wow, just because you're a parent doesn't mean you have all the answers or that you have everything figured out. You're still that same person. And now you have the additional responsibilities of, creating a safe and loving and nurturing environment for any children that you have or anyone around you, really. So the purpose of this program is just to talk about all of this and to kind of explore how the human mind has like a negativity bias where we're more focused on stressors and we're worried about our deadlines and getting to places on time and worried about milestones and how our kids are doing, which is really good. The mind is developed that way because we were born to survive, and by attending to threats, that's how we stay alive. But the world has changed a lot, and a lot of times we don't have to attend so much on these threats anymore because these threats are not life-threatening anymore. So through my program, Commit to You, I work with people to help them, be intentional in their perceptions and their actions and how they show up to the world so that we both hold on to this natural inclination we have to focus on, what are the things I should look out for to keep everyone safe, as well as, attending to the positive things like what matters to me, what are these privileges around me, how can I enjoy these moments. So that's a little bit about what you can expect today. So the first part of my program is related to some psychoeducation and just information about child development. As parents, we don't necessarily have the experience of taking a lifespan class or anything like that. So I think it's really helpful if, just having some information about all the things that our children go through from the day that they're born to the time that they're ready to go out of the world and, start living their own lives more so independently. Of course, if independent living is part of our cultural values. So that's going to be the first part, kind of just talking about the different changes that they go through. Then the next three parts of the program are going to be kind of just some ideas on how we can be intentional and how we, focus our attention on, and then how we show up in our experiences with our children. So let's get started with part one. So as you know, if you're a parent or if you're a human being, kids go through a lot of physical changes. When they're first born, they can hardly move. All they can move is their hands and their legs. Then they start crawling, then they start walking. They grow in height, then puberty happens, and all sorts of changes happen, and different parts of their body are maturing. Their desires are changing. They're starting to move towards adulthood. So there's a lot of different changes, and as you can imagine, it's a lot for children to keep up with all these things. Every milestone they have means that they're introduced to a different environment. When you start walking, that means you have access to getting to places and exploring new things. So all of those physical changes lead to cognitive changes because we have access to more, we can do more. One of the things I really want to focus on is during adolescence, you go through a lot of physical changes. Different parts of your body are growing at different times. Your hormones are kind of all over the place. And as you can imagine, that can be both exciting, like, wow, these are signs that now we're moving towards adulthood, we're becoming, we're moving beyond maybe childhood. So that part can be exciting as well as scary. And also, as we adolescents, as they're growing, their cognitive abilities are growing as well. Before adolescence, kids are really limited to like what they see around them. They do a really good job at controlling like their toys, and they can use a lot of skills to put their toys in patterns or to even do math and etc. But as you start really growing, especially in adolescence, your mind is just like really, really blowing up, and your abstract ability is really blowing up. And that's when you start really thinking about like, who am I? Like, what's important to me? What do I believe in? So as with when those thoughts come and you're physically changing, it could lead to some self-consciousness about your body, comparing yourself to others. So it can be a difficult time. So I think for parents, during these physical changes, it's important to be present, to simply listen to how the child is experiencing all of these changes, kind of validating how it might feel like to go through these changes, to be at school, to be with their peers, to be with family, and how these changes might be coming up, how other people might be experiencing these things, how other people are treating us, how we're feeling. So I think it's really important that parents intentionally, are present to notice what the child is going through, what the adolescent is going through, and just normalize that. Wow, this is a lot, and there's some good parts of it. There's some challenging, anxiety-provoking parts of it, but just like showing up, normalizing what they're seeing, like what they're feeling, and just being there for whatever they might need. I think this is really important because as children are going through these phases and their abstract thinking skills are increasing, it can be really difficult to, be okay with yourself. Now that during this phase of life, you're really thinking about who you are and where you fit in the world and if you belong. Like, I think if parents are able to create a safe space where the child, the adolescent, feels seen and valued just as they are, as their bodies and brains are changing, I think that could be really helpful, and that can help the child internalize that approach of flexibly being open to all these changes, as well as still feeling confident and building their self-esteem. Another part of the cognitive development I want to talk about is a lot of times, I think adolescents especially get a bad rep for being like rebellious or being impulsive, and it's really not their fault. As I mentioned, during this phase of time, your brain is just really growing and your abilities are growing. And one of the things that our brain really wants us to do is your brain wants you to learn. And how do we learn? We learn by exploring, by trying different things. So adolescents, just like children when they're growing up, they want to try different things and they're asking questions like, why this, why that, why that? They want to touch different things. Similar to what they went through in childhood, adolescents are also going through this phase of just wanting to learn more. We talked about how their identity is forming. So a part of identity development is, in American culture, or in an individualistic culture, is trying different things and figuring out what is the right fit for me. So you might want to try art or science or plumbing or whatever it might be. Your child might naturally be interested in different things, and if they're given opportunities to start exploring these different things, it can really help them in, start figuring out, where they belong, what activities are more consistent with their interests, what their skills are, and helping them develop those skills as well. But this curiosity in learning is, of course, not limited to the professional settings or the academic settings. It also relates to peer settings. It relates to just like activities and doing things that maybe previously you didn't have the ability to do, such as driving, or the independence to do, such as like staying out late or having more exposure with friends, with less with less parental guidance or parental involvement around. So as you're growing up, and in an individualistic culture, it is developmentally appropriate for the child and the adolescent to just have more independence, to have more space for themselves. And the more that parents could help create that space, I think that could be really helpful. And sometimes it's really hard for parents to kind of give their child or their adolescent like some space to make decisions, to try out different things. And it makes sense, right? As a parent, we've lived a whole life. We've seen the good, the bad, everything, right? And we love our children so much that we just want the best for them. And sometimes that desire of protection can come off as controlling and can actually negatively impact their development, right? So I think one thing that could be really helpful to reduce some of the rebellion and the impulsive actions during this phase of life is to, I kind of call it like the parent-child dance, where as your child is growing, whether they're just starting to crawl or to walk or to drive, starting giving them a little bit more space, a little bit more autonomy, and making their own decisions, and making the choices they want and doing the things that they want. Well, of course, the parent is still there, available, and available both whether it's to actually see them physically when they're younger, or when their children are older, available to just provide feedback or to provide some regulation if they're coming back and they're struggling with something, or they're going through some kind of challenge with their friends, or they can't figure out how to drive properly at night. Whatever it might be, the child is going to come back to you if they feel like, they have a space where they can be seen, their experiences can be validated, and that they can get feedback from you on how to keep moving towards, their growing independence. So I think if parents are able to let go a little bit and start creating space for their autonomy, then I think as children have that autonomy, they're more likely to still come back. On the other hand, if parents are not willing to give their adolescents some autonomy, some control, I think that could lead to them kind of just doing things against the parents' wishes. And then they're really missing out on that key piece of parental feedback and communication that is key in helping us help our children become autonomous, responsible, well-rounded adults. So I think it's difficult for parents to do this, of course, and it's going to take time and progress. But with some intention and effort and open communication, I'm sure you can find what's right for your family and for your culture. The last thing I wanted to mention related to kind of how the adolescent their brain is really wired to learn, and their brains are really wired for rewards, to try different things, and our brain develops in different ways and at different speeds. Though their amygdala and all these other parts are really wired during adolescence, other parts of their brain, such as their prefrontal cortex that kind of help with more rational decision making, those parts are still developing, so they might not yet have all the reasoning skills that they need to make the right decision. So I think that's why having that open communication and space for the child and adolescent to come back to the parent is really important, because then the parent can help guide developing those skills that they naturally are not going to have yet, just because of brain development. So I think open communication and just being adaptable in your parenting could be really helpful in helping your child become more autonomous and responsible. All right. Another thing I really want to mention is just the social component of this. Throughout our life, whether we're children, whether we're infants, adolescents, adults, we all are social beings, and our social resources are really important. If you think about it, it makes sense, right? One of the best ways to get something, whether we were out there foraging for things or we're here now in our more city-like lifestyles, the more people you know, the more access to resources you have, the more activities you know about, the more opportunities for work you might know. So we are social beings. And this part becomes really, really important during adolescence, when at the one side, you're really starting to develop an understanding of who you are, where you belong in the world. The question of like who you belong with, I think, also is important. And I think as an adolescent is starting to, figure out their self-esteem, one of their biggest comparison groups is the people around them, right? So they're comparing themselves to their peers and like trying to figure out like, how am I doing? How am I performing compared to my peers? What am I good at? And that this could lead to kind of like feelings of inferiority or even feelings of competence. So I think it's really important first for parents to recognize that it's not easy to be an adolescent or a child when you're compared to your peers, right? Which you naturally are, both internally and through your environment, even through grades. Even if you think about it, certain classes are based on skill level. So I think just having some empathy for what it's like and being very intentional in trying your best, like not to compare, and trying your best to help, your child build self-esteem. So no matter what feedback or experiences they're having at school or their other domains of life, that they can start forming a foundation in who they are. So those other things, the stronger your foundation in you, those other experiences will impact you, hopefully, a little bit less. Of course, we're humans. We all get hurt. We all have joy. We all feel good about something. We all win. We all lose. That's just being human. But the more we can see our child, value our child, help them move towards like what things they're good at, what their interests are, the more we can build their self-esteem, the more they will internalize it as well, and the more fortified they will be during these social experiences. Just like, we're saying your child is going to be more aware of social experiences and wanting to fit in, so is everyone else. So, and like I mentioned before, this is at the same time as, their cognitive abilities in terms of like problem solving and reasoning isn't the best. So sometimes we might not even be aware of like how we're showing up in this world. So sometimes this can even lead to bullying, right? If you think about it, if we're all just trying to find a place we belong, we're all just trying to fit in, we all just are trying to have acceptance, this is sometimes related to power hierarchies, and this can sometimes kind of lead to like bullying, because, sometimes bullies are, just trying to have power and to have that social power, and sometimes one of the ways to get it is by putting someone else down. So bullying, and especially right now, it's a biggest concern more than any other time in our world because of social media. Anytime a child goes on social media, they have access to the entire world. They have access to people's opinions and thoughts about them. They have access to what other people are portraying about their lives on social media, which, as I'm sure you know, what you see on social media isn't always reality. What you see on social media is what has been tweaked and made to look perfect, filters, everything. But our brain doesn't understand that. Our brain sees what is presented, and our brain judges that and oftentimes a natural way our brain will work is we have access to all the parts of our body, like our bodies and our lives and everything. So all the good and the bad. But when we're on social media, we are only seeing a lot of times only the positive, the picturesque parts of what's happening. So the more you can be a part of their social media and just their social experiences, just being present, just listening to what they're going through, providing feedback when they want it. And sometimes they might not want feedback, and just even attending to that. As humans, sometimes we just need someone to listen to us, to see us, and validate what we're feeling. So maybe that's what they need. So really tuning into what is it my child needs and what can I provide? Because if that open communication is kind of open, then they're more likely to seek you out when they need it. So as you can tell by now, we've talked about a lot of different things and how they're developing, from social experiences to cognitive experiences to their physical body. So all of this is happening all at once throughout their life, right? So this is a lot to experience, right? And one of the things, unfortunately or fortunately, sometimes it's a lot, because this is a lot to handle, the child or the adolescent might not know or might not have the skills to handle it, especially during adolescence when your body has so many hormones and the parts of your body that are driven to like do things and learn things and go out in the world are working more actively than your like reasoning skills. So this can lead to a lot of like tantrums or mood dysregulation or outbursts. So I think for this phase of life, another thing that's really, really important is emotion regulation, for parents to be present and to try their best to kind of teach their children more healthy ways of regulating and showing up to the world. And the last three parts of this program is really ways that as parents we can both utilize a lot of these practices ourselves to regulate our emotions, our thoughts, our bodies, our brains, our actions. So in service of like our children seeing how we're showing up in the world, because that's the main way that they learn as well as we can directly share these strategies that we're using. So that we're going to cover today, especially, and we're going to be spending 3 whole parts on it because of how important it is, kind of teaching our children how to regulate their emotions and their behaviors. This is especially really important because during this phase of life, a big risk, of course, is substance use and other dangerous behavioral lifestyles or choices. And it's not anyone's fault. The adolescent is just, trying their best to figure out, how to cope with all these changes, figure out where they are in this world, who they are. And sometimes if they don't have the right coping skills or the right esteem, they might make decisions that they might regret, and that can have, of course, cascading effects, such as substance use, right? Adolescents and even children these days can utilize substances for a lot of different reasons. One, maybe they don't have the emotion regulation skills to really cope with everything that they're going through. So maybe substance use is a way to escape their experiences. Maybe substance use is related to like what's around them. It's their way of getting peer acceptance. Maybe they feel like, oh, if I have a few drinks or I smoke, I'll be less anxious and I'll fit in more. I'll look cooler. So even sometimes I think it's hard for parents to talk about substance use, which makes sense, right? Because it is something that we don't want for our children sometimes, and sometimes parents are okay with it. We all vary in our opinions. But I think the more we can talk to our children about the reality that they're going to be exposed to various different substances, and we teach them what is like healthy ways of approaching this, I think that could be really helpful. And then, of course, always trying our best to equip them with the skills and techniques they need to regulate themselves so that they're not overusing or abusing substances as a way of coping with life. So another thing I wanted to talk about, which I already kind of started alluding to, was just the parent-child relationship and how I truly believe that no matter how old your child is, whether they're 1 or 55, I truly believe that that relationship is foundational for the good or the bad. And even though, of course, the frequency of conversations, the frequency of sharing your space with them might change, so much of who we are, we've become based on what we've seen our parents doing, how our parents have directly taught us on how to regulate and show up to the world. So that relationship is really important. And I think adapting that relationship as your child grows, as your child goes through different experiences, is really important, because having access to a loving and nurturing relationship to a parent, I think, is a game changer. And I think that's the most important resiliency and protective factor any child can have. And this resiliency factor can help them. Even if they make mistakes, they're going to make mistakes. That's how we learn as humans. Even if they make mistakes, that's what's going to help them still keep moving towards the life of their dreams, and moving towards their passions. So, right. So now we're going to move on to the second portion of this program, Like I mentioned, the first portion was more so just like psychoeducation about child and adolescent development, so that I think having an understanding of what they're going through can help us have more empathy as parents on like all the experiences they are going through. So, and the more empathy we have for them, the more understanding we have for them, the more we can be present to them, as well as give them what they need. And of course, that changes throughout their lifespan, like we already talked about. Just gonna have a sip of water. So, I had a sip of water because I must have noticed that I was thirsty. So that is a perfect example of what we're going to start talking about in our next section, which is self-compassion for parents. So yes, we spent a lot of time talking about child and what they're going through. And yes, as parents, we're still human beings. And it is not easy to be a parent. Yes, I always want to start off by saying what a privilege it is to have our children, to be there for our children. Yes, it is such a privilege, and I hope I can remember that every single day. And at the same time, it is not easy, right? We have so much on our plates. I think these days, more than ever, in previous generations, there was much more community involvement, family involvement, and nowadays I feel like there's a lot of responsibilities on parents. So I think it is important for parents to take care of themselves for them to be able to take care of their children. First, like I said, children learn from how we show up in the world. Their brains have mirror neurons, all of our brains do, and one of the most impactful ways we learn is just by seeing how people show up, especially our parents, because those are our guides in this world, right? Those are the resources through which we learn. So I think in order for parents to show up and be the parents they really want to be, and to be able to teach their children how to emotionally regulate and how to grow up and like live the lives that they want, I think they have to model that themselves. That's just my personal opinion. And I think self-compassion, which is part 2 of our program, is really integral. So the first part of self-compassion is just mindfulness. So mindfulness is simply kind of being very intentional about our relationship to what we're experiencing, to what's going on around the world, right? Or around us. So mindfulness is really important because, one, it's a great way to start to emotionally regulate what we're feeling. It's a great coping skill. So one easy way to understand mindfulness is that you're simply having the intention to attend to whatever emotions, physical sensations, thoughts that you're having, and you're just noticing them. You're not trying to get rid of them. You're not trying to change them. It's a very non-judgmental, compassionate process. And the purpose of this is because through mindfulness, we can really help ground to what's actually happening. As you guys, I'm sure, know, our minds are busy, focusing on what happened, what's going to happen. But like through mindfulness, one, you get to just ground to the present moment, which in itself is an intervention or a coping skill. Two, it gives you the power to really start noticing, what am I experiencing? I'm noticing that I'm getting anxious, or I'm getting angry, or I'm getting worked up, or I'm happy and I'm joyful, I'm grateful, whatever it is. Mindfulness gives you the opportunity to really tune into what you're experiencing, which is really powerful coping mechanism, because oftentimes, have you guys ever had the experience where you were just, something happens, you're just really upset, and you're just reacting, you're texting back, you're messaging back, or you're yelling back, and then later on you're like regretting what you did because you said things you didn't mean, you impacted people in a way that, you didn't mean to. And sometimes, yes, we are hopefully, forgiving people and we fix things because we all make mistakes, right? But sometimes it's really helpful if you just take a second to ground to what you're experiencing, that gives you much more control over how you want to intentionally show up. First, it tells you, like, emotions, I think sometimes get a bad rep, but I think emotions are actually really, really helpful because they are telling us information about what's happening. Say something happens at work and you're feeling angry, then maybe that anger might be telling you that something is happening that is maybe unjust or not fair. So emotions are actually one of the ways that we survive this world, but because of kind of how we're socialized to avoid emotions and also how our body biologically works, we kind of run away from threat. And if our body feels like our emotions are threatening, we're going to try to run away from it, which is, of course, not very helpful. But sometimes, especially in cases of trauma, that's the best we can do, and that's okay too. So I definitely don't want to invalidate how sometimes avoidance is the only option we have, and that's fine. But sometimes in parenting, it's really important, and even in adulting, it is important to just try to, ground to the present moment, notice what you're feeling, and then that gives you the space of reacting based on how, not reacting, actually acting in a way that's consistent with how you want to show up in the world. So I think that's really important, both for the emotional regulation component as well as the intentional action component as well. So the second component of self-compassion, we already talked about mindfulness. The second component of self-compassion, based on Kristen Neff's definition, is common humanity. And this is a big one. Common humanity is just remembering that all of us are in this together. That, sometimes, say something happens to your child or say something happens at work, you might feel like very alone. You might feel very self-critical over yourself. Like, how could you do this? Like, other people, remember her picture she posted on Facebook? Like, she's doing her life so well. She has a great job. She has a great family. And here I am just messing up, right? So it's often common to feel like alienated and isolated when things go wrong. But through common humanity, we actually remind ourselves that, all of us are really in a similar boat where things go well sometimes, things don't go well sometimes, we're trying, we're messing up, and it's just a process. It's being human, right? So reminding ourselves that the things we're going through are normal. Humans go through it, other parents go through it, other adults go through it, other children go through it, I think can be really helpful. Also, kind of having social support could be helpful. So the program that I'm bringing to you today, I often do in groups, and I basically have people do the practices, and then they talk in pairs, and then we talk as a whole group. And I think one of the things that makes my program so successful in helping people, I think, is just when they're in their peers and they're actually sharing with another human being, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they learned through their practice, what they experienced in their practice, and they see wow, you're actually going through something similar to me, or your life looks similar to me. We are all so connected and going through similar things, but our mind sometimes thinks that we're not because we're comparing all the time. So that common humanity part, I think, is gold, and that's where the magic is, just creating spaces where you can talk to other parents, talk to other adults, support others, get support. And then the more you're supported, both through yourself, through self-compassion, as well as through your social supports, the more you can support your children, both by the modeling as well as just sharing with them all these different things they can do. Then the last component of self-compassion is actually self-kindness. I think this is a very foreign idea for most people, no matter what culture you're in. Though if there is a culture that is really big on self-kindness, I would love to learn about that culture for sure. So what self-kindness means is just being compassionate to yourself. If you think about it, if something happens to a friend or a family member, a lot of us might feel empathy for them. We might hug them. We might listen to them. We might do something nice for them, or take them to a dinner or to a movie, or watch their kids so they can get some rest. We'll do something that would help that person feel better, to feel taken care of. Now imagine if you yourself did something and things didn't work out, you tried your best, or maybe you didn't try your best. But how are we more likely to relate to ourselves? Probably not similarly. A lot of us are very critical towards ourselves. We judge ourselves. We're angry at ourselves. And if you think about it, this part of us especially comes out when things go wrong. But when things go wrong, it's actually you yourself who has to deal with it. So not only now do you have to deal with the consequences of what happened, and of like your dream not working out, or whatever you're working on not working out. Now you also have this person like bullying you, and like just making you feel bad. Like, would we ever do that to a friend if they didn't get the job they wanted, or if their project wasn't successful? Like, would we go out of our way to make them feel bad or to yell at them? And if the answer is yes, then that's a whole different problem. But for a lot of us, the answer is like no. Like, we would want to support them, and that, of course, challenges happen, and we're not perfect, and we would want to support them. So the last component of self-kindness is really about bringing that relationship to yourself. First, of not being so self-critical and just being compassionate that, you did your best. There was all these different factors involved on why you were able to put in the effort, or even if you were able to put in the effort, why it didn't work out. Just having that perspective that it's fine and this is just like a small thing, and not being so self-critical. And then on top of it, really being thoughtful of like, what can I do to support myself? How can I help myself celebrate this? Or how can I help myself heal from this? For example, I'm, excited about today and like, recording my programs and being able to share it with a new group of people. So one of the things that I want to do to take care of myself is after this, my plan is to do something a little bit fun just to honor that for myself. So, finding ways to take care of yourself, because you're a person who's out here, who's trying so hard at work or with your children or within your relationships or within your physical health or whatever you're spending your time doing. So the person who's there doing all these things needs to be taken care of. And the more you utilize these practices of being mindful, regulating your emotions, understanding your emotions, remembering that as humans, we all go through challenges and it's okay, and finding ways to take care of yourself, the more you can do that, your children are going to see that, the more they're going to start learning to show up like that, and the more you can even motivate that and like teach them how to be compassionate. It's really hard to teach someone else to be compassionate if you're not compassionate towards yourself. So I think that's really important. So now the third part actually, of my program is, like I mentioned before, it's very common for the human mind to focus on the negatives. And we talked about how through self-compassion, we kind of target creating a new relationship with yourself where you're kind and compassionate. So now this part is also related to that negativity bias. But a lot of times we're like walking through our lives and we're focusing on deadlines and making sure we get our kids to school on time, or making sure we're getting things done. And sometimes we're just being mindless in the sense of like, we're not necessarily prioritizing what's most important to us, but we're prioritizing what we have to get done. And sometimes the things that have deadlines and things maybe related to work, they kind of just have that emotional salience that tells our brain like, this is what I need to focus on and I need to get this done and then I can think about other things later. But the reality is that's not necessarily true. I know that I personally don't like to think about this too much, but the reality is we all have a limited time on this earth. We all have limited moments, right? And we all have limited moments with our children. When they're younger, it's a little bit overwhelming because we have so much time with them and it's a lot to handle. But then as they grow older, we're going to look back and like miss those moments, even though we know that they were so hard and we want to honor that, with the different perspective. We're like, dang, I wish I had just enjoyed it more, right? So the last two parts of my program is to help us remind ourselves that, wait, life is more than just about deadlines and what I need to get done and showing up everywhere on time. Life is also about what's important to me and making time for those things and showing up in the ways that I really want to. So the third part of my program is clarifying like what my values are and how do I want to show up in this world. Because this program is for parents, I'm specifically going to focus on values related to parenting. But of course, you could apply this to any domain in your life, from your physical health to your other relationships, your work, etc. So I think one thing that really helps us as parents create those strong foundational relationships that can help guide our children is being very intentional in how we're showing up in the moments that we have with our children. And those very lucky moments that we have, though sometimes those moments don't feel as lucky, but we really are overall. So values basically are in acceptance and commitment therapy, which is what my program is based on. So values in acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, mean really being thoughtful about like what parts of my life are important to me. And for this exercise, we're going to be thinking about parenting because that's what we're focusing on. And then once you're chosen a domain of life that's important, then you start thinking about, how do I want to show up in these moments? How do I want to show up around my children? What kind of mom do I want to be? So values are not about goals. It's not about making sure your child thinks you're the best mom ever, though would that not be nice? But values is more so like, how do I want to act? So I think one example I can give is, let's see, what's my most important value as a mom? I think being nurturing is a very important value for me. My life, just like I'm sure yours, is super busy. I have a really intensive career. I have a house I have to clean and keep together. I have to cook for my kids. I have to take care of my kids, and I'm like the primary caregiver because my husband's job is a little bit less flexible. He's a physician, so his job is very, very, very demanding. So I am the primary caregiver, and that's the way I like it. I love to be present. I'm so lucky to have these moments, and I want to cherish it. But as you can see, there is a lot on my plate, and I have to manage a lot. And oftentimes that's a reality of a lot of women as well. Not to genderize things, but that's just a reality. Like, I think moms are rock stars, and we do so much, and like I don't think moms get enough credit. So I'm giving moms credit, and I know some people are probably gonna not like that, but it is what it is. I think moms are freaking awesome, and so are all other types of parents, including dads or other caregivers. But special space in my heart for moms. So I think because like what I was saying was, because I have so much on my plate, sometimes I notice when I pick up my kids, I might be tired, I might be overwhelmed, I might be stressed because I didn't finish my work yet, or maybe I'm just like burnt out after like an interaction I had, or, I have to still cook and clean or whatever. And first I want to like obviously give that is a valid reaction. You're only human. You're going to be tired. And as a working parent with children who are in full-time school, I only get to see my children maybe 4 or 5 hours a day where I'm really with them and interacting with them. And there is nothing more important to me than my children. Of course, I love other aspects of my life, but I think my children are the most important. So it's really important for me that when I'm with them, that I create safety for them. As a psychologist and a psychologist who does the kind of work I do, because I do a lot of work with trauma, one of the things I know is how important it is for kids to have safety, to have security, to have stability. But when you're going through so much in your own life, it's easy to be sometimes like more reactive around your children, or to do things that are not consistent with how you want to show up and not consistent with what is good for brain development. But we're humans, right? So I think for me, one of my biggest values is to be a nurturing mom, which means I make sure that when I'm with them, that I'm grounded, that I am not reactive, that I'm not yelling, that I'm being kind, that I'm being present to notice what is my child going through and how can I meet those needs. How can I help them develop educationally? How can I help them just laugh? So that's the kind of mom I want to be. I want to be nurturing. I want to be present and provide what they need. I do not know what percentage of my experiences with them I show up like that. But I do know I am much more likely to show up like that when, before I pick them up, something I do is I take a deep breath and I try to remember, what is important to me in this moment. I try to remember, wow, like now I get to spend the rest of the night just spending time with my children. And though it is so much fun for me, I am still their mom, and it's my responsibility that they have a safe environment around them. So I remind myself of what is important to me, which is being a nurturing mom. Yes, I might have to teach tomorrow and I'm stressed because I didn't finish my slides. And I remind myself that is less important than being a nurturing mom. So I'm going to choose to focus on that, and I'm going to choose not to focus and worry about my work, because work will always have time, but your children need to have the time that you want to give them as well. So taking the time, even if it's just like 1 minute, to be intentional about, hey, I'm going to spend time with my kids now. How do I want to show up in this moment? Another time it could be really helpful to practice this, for me anyways, is one of the benefits of practicing mindfulness and just being aware of how your body is showing up in different moments. I notice that I act most inconsistent with my values during drop-off, especially if we're like running late and I might like yell or say, come on, we gotta go. I might hurry them. I might be stressed out. So one of the things I've started doing is in the car, when I'm noticing my reactivity, I'll just like ask, okay, guys, who wants to lead like a breathing exercise? And together, all three of us, me and my 2 kids, we just practice breathing. We just focus on our breath, and it is like such a grounding experience. And it just helps my body just calm down. It helps tell my body that, okay, yes, you're running late, and it's not the end of the world. You'd rather be late and grounded than late and yelling at your children, right? So through that practice of grounding to the moment, being aware of how I'm acting, and then being intentional with my values, guides my behavior in that. I'd rather be late than yell at my children. So those are that's an example of how I use it myself. And I think breathing exercises are a wonderful, wonderful way to help do this. And the reason I say that is because your breath is there with you wherever you are. And it's something that we all have if we're alive. So something we all share. You can do a breathing exercise whether your eyes are open or if they're closed, or etc. So we can do a breathing exercise right now if that could be helpful. So if you want to just close your eyes or bring the gaze to the floor. Noticing any noises in the room. Noticing how your body feels supported by the chair you're sitting on, or by the ground if you're standing. And now I invite you to simply notice your breath as it goes in and out of your body. And if your mind wanders, that's okay. That's what the mind does. Just simply returning your attention to your intention of following your breath. Noticing any sounds in the room. And then coming back to the present moment when you're ready by opening your eyes or lifting the gaze, but taking your time with it. I'm gonna have some more water. So, how did the practice go for you? That was just a very quick example. So, you can do that practice for whatever, length of time that works for you. Maybe you only have 30 seconds, or maybe you want something longer. So you can do that practice for as long as or as little as you have time, to do so. And I think utilizing these practices, even structuring it into your life, can be really helpful. Initially, maybe just saying, oh, I'm going to do 5 minutes of mindfulness every night or every morning. I think it could help to start intentionally building those mindfulness skills that can really, really come in handy when you are trying to live an intentional life and you're trying your best to show up for yourself and for your family in the way that's consistent with your values. So some other examples of values that could be helpful as parents are, being present. It's one thing to be with your children versus actually being with your children, engaging with them versus, just sitting near them, but being on your phone or doing your work. So being present is a value that is important to me as a parent. Another value that's important to me as a parent is being mindful of what my children are experiencing. The more I practice being mindful of my own experience to the limit of my ability, of course, it's going to help me be mindful of what my children are going through. And as a parent, that is very important for us to be mindful of what our children are going through, because it is only when we know what they're going through that we can provide for them what they need, whether it's emotional regulation or some kind of guidance on how to grow. So being mindful for me as a parent is mindful of their needs is really important. And being compassionate and understanding that my children are doing the best that they can and that I'm doing the best that I can is really important to me. So these are just examples of values that I think personally are really important to parents, but I also know that these are values that are important to me. So your values can be anything, right? Everyone is so different and everyone's views on parenting is different. Everyone's needs are different. So I think if you want to spend some time just thinking about, how do you want to show up with your children? Maybe you want to be silly and make them laugh, or, work on nurturing their education. Whatever it is, you're the parent. You get to decide what's important to you. And by utilizing different coping skills, it can help you be intentional in how you're showing up in your time with your children. So, wow, we are coming to an end. So the last component, or component 4, of my program is related to values, but it's really helping us engage in these value-based moments with our children. As humans, we forget that life is limited. Like I said, we focus a lot on what needs to be done, our responsibilities, which is important, of course. Our children being fed and sheltered, all of that is obviously really important. So, of course, our responsibilities are really important. And what's also important is for me personally, what helps with countering that human negativity bias of focusing on what needs to be done exactly is to make the time to really show up, to be aware and appreciate what this moment means. Like, for example, when I was driving here, of course, in my head, one of the things I like to do is I practice in my head. I'm a professor, so a lot of my work is doing this and talking. So a lot of times, I practice in my head while driving. And of course, that's also a way to be responsible and make sure you're prepared for the program you're going to do. And it's also important to kind of take a step back a little bit from the actual details of what you're doing and try to remember, what does this moment mean? So that's exactly what I did on my car ride here, where I thought about, wait, this is one of the programs that I'm doing through my own business. I own my own business. It's called Commit to You PLC. And you can find out more information on my website, committoyou.org. A little bit of a plug. But yeah, I took the moment to be hey, this is kind of cool. I own my own business and I'm going to a studio and they're going to film me talking about my program. And I get the privilege of sharing my ideas and what I've learned through my education with other people to help other parents who might be struggling the way that I do every day. I struggle every day, and that is the reality. And wow, what a privilege. What a moment. And like I said, we don't know how long our lives are going to be or what turn life is going to take next. And one way I want to be self-compassionate is by making the time and space to honor, whoa, that's pretty cool, Sejal. This is pretty cool. And I hope you can enjoy this moment. You're here sharing your ideas and your work and your program, and honor that and enjoy that. Yes, it's probably stressful too. Basically, I'm just sitting in front of this camera and just talking. Sorry. So yeah, components of that are stressful, of course, to make sure you are prepared to what you're going to talk about and that it makes sense and that it's going to be helpful. And you want to enjoy it. This is a life experience that not everyone gets to do. Maybe not everyone would want to do it, but it's something to not take lightly. And I think this is the same idea that my fourth part of my program is about, which is just being intentional. Sometimes life can become routine and we're so used to this crunch between taking care of our work and our children, and we forget the importance of it, or I do anyways. Just taking some time to really think about or just notice that what a privilege it is. My kids are 4.5 and 6 and they're so young and they've been here for a while, and time is flying by, and I don't want to not appreciate these moments I have. And it's easy not to at times when I'm so stressed and overworked and just having all these responsibilities that all of us have. And to me personally, there's nothing more important and magical than the time that I spent with my children. So I want to remember that, because that's an important part of mental health too. Sometimes it's so easy to focus on what you don't have or what you wish you had. But what about some gratitude on what you do have? What about intentionally focusing on, wait, what do I have right now? And I have my 2 kids, and there's nothing more important than that. And I'm so lucky. So really bringing gratitude into our lives to recognize and see all that we have. And that's not to negate the traumas you've gone through, the things you don't have, the pains you have. Yes, part of humanity is having that. And some of us have a little bit more, some of us have a little bit less. It is what it is. And that's not to negate that at all. And especially if you've been through a lot of trauma and a lot of tough parts, but now you have the privilege of having this new family, having your kids, why not enjoy it and create those experiences of joy and fun? And I truly believe that that's what our children's brains and our brains as well. That is what they need to thrive. We go to the local Y, and the moments that I just like see my children like swimming in the pool or like, dancing around or playing with their friends, it's in those moments that I just feel so much joy that I am able to provide play for them, safety, engagement, social resources. So I think the more we can try to intentionally show up with gratitude for what we do have and these moments we do have, it just gives us that perspective to take a step back from our stressors and really value what we have in front of us, which I think for most of us, we though we might have a lot of challenges and traumas, we also have so much. The fact that we're all watching this means that maybe we have children, and how lucky are we? So there is always so much to be grateful for, and having gratitude is a way for us to target that human negativity bias and to introduce a positive of like, yes, all these things are happening. I just had a conflict with my partner and I'm upset, and these are all the things that I'm so happy for, that I'm grateful for. So it just basically evens out the playing field and reminds you what's really, really important. And similar to gratitude is a concept called like savoring. It's interesting because a lot of people, even in psychology, sometimes don't know what savoring is. And even the people who like know what savoring is oftentimes like relate it to like eating and like savoring the bites and stuff. And yes, that is one form of savoring practice. But savoring can be applied to anything. And I think one of the best parts of my program is just sharing this idea with people that like you can savor your moments and really enjoy them and immerse yourself in them. And hey, if our minds can be used to ruminate and worry and feel like shit about things, they're probably going to need to take that word out, probably, sorry. If our brain can help us make us feel bad about things, why not use that same capacity to make us feel good, to maximize our enjoyment and our joy in the moment? And that, to me, is what savoring is. And that's what I try to do with my children whenever I can. So you could savor the moment when you're with them by like actually being there, recognizing this is like such a wonderful, joyous moment, and like holding on to that joy and feeling that joy and like talking about that joy even. And savoring is something you can also like use looking back on. Like one moment that I've been savoring is, so usually I pick up my children and then we do dinner time. Then eventually my husband, I don't know why I said my dad, sorry. My husband comes home and he does like bedtime routine. So I remember I was sitting on the couch and I saw my children get out of the shower, and my youngest son, my 4-year-old, like made a noise and he got my attention and he just like laughed. And it was just basically him looking at me and like just enjoying that moment. And just like that attachment experience of him just seeing me gives him happiness. And then I looked at him and then I was so happy and I was so joyous and so grateful. And I was savoring that moment like, wow, like, there's no greater joy than this connection I have with my sons. And like just taking this moment to just look at each other and to just be appreciative of each other and to just really lean into that feeling. And not only did I get to enjoy that moment then, but I remind myself of that moment quite often, especially like when I'm not feeling so good. It just reminds me of like what's important, and it gives me an experience to immerse myself in as a way of just helping to make myself feel better and to remind me of like what's important. Yes, whatever happening in this moment, whatever is making me upset, it's not ideal. And the most important things in my life, my children, are happy and they're healthy, and like what else could I want, right? So some cool ways that I do to practice some of these ideas is pictures. So pictures are a really great way of savoring the moment. So you could take pictures, you could take videos. Actually, let me take a picture right now so I can remember this moment. Just have to make sure that I know how to turn the camera on. So let me take a picture. And I know nowadays we all are just taking pictures on our phones and we're not carrying around like actual cameras. But a lot of times it's kind of nice to actually have an actual copy of a picture. I remember one of the last times I was doing one of my programs, it was at like a holy event for my town, and my children were there, and I took a picture of them holding one of the things for my program. And now I'll always, whenever I look at this picture, I remember, wow, like that day I was there, I was sharing my program with people in my town and my practices, and then my kids were there and they got to see me be a psychologist. You know, they're so used to me just being their mom. You know, this lady who, you know, drops them off and picks them up and cooks for them. But this was an opportunity where they got to see a different side of me, a businesswoman. I was there with a booth for my company. They saw me talking to different people, explaining my program to them, you know, having different people utilizing my practices. Like, they got to see a different side of me, and I got to experience all that with them. And now this picture is a way I can continue to savor and remind myself of that moment. So these are ways that we can increase all the positive feelings and experiences in our lives by being intentional. Another thing that I just want to make sure I close my camera perfectly. Yeah, you just close it like that, apparently. Clearly, I don't use that camera too much. Another one I use to practice gratitude and savoring is through writing. So one of the things I suggest to people is at the end of the night or whenever you need it, just sit down for like 2 minutes and write about a moment that you had that you were grateful for, what you were grateful for about in that moment, and then and just savoring it again, immersing yourself in that experience. What was happening in that experience? How you were feeling? What was it like? And then you'll always have that moment, basically, you know, here in your notebook for you to come back to at any times. Another way I suggest to do it is just having a piece of paper and having a little box where you put whatever you wrote, and then anytime you're feeling down, you know, anytime you just want to, you can just take one of the notes out or flip open a page and just remind yourself and savor that moment again. Like, we are, as humans, we ruminate, we worry so much. We should all have PhDs on that, right? So why not get PhDs on savoring and gratitude? Because then that would probably really help with our mental health and help us really see, wow, look how much I have in my life. And you might not have a lot. You know, you might not, right? And that is a reality. That's a reality for a lot of people. And if you actually choose to focus on what you do have, imagine how that's going to impact what you're paying attention to. How often are there people who have everything? Of course, it's easy to judge, and I am so sorry if I'm coming off judgmental, but even if I think about myself, I have so much. I have a safe place to live. I have a job. I have money, whatever. All those things other people would die for. But like, if you're not even aware or intentional of how much you do have, then you can never even enjoy and actually be grateful for what you have. And I think a lot of times we learn to be grateful for what we have when we lose it. But then that's too late. You don't have it anymore, and that's why you see the value. But what if we saw the value of what we have when we have it? Like, how much would that change our experience, our daily experience, and what importance do we give to what? And then the last practice I wanted to show was this rock exercise. This is basically one of the exercises I do with my values work. So essentially, my suggestion would be choose one of your values for one of the important life domains. And as you might remember, my valued life domain was being a parent, and my value was nurturance. So basically, I could write nurturance on it, or I can just pictorially, like, just draw on it, or write poetry, or whatever way that is consistent with with what works for me, what gives me meaning, I can put on this rock. So one, it gives me the space to explore my values and how I want to show up. And then two, whenever I'm having those moments when I'm being reactive and I know I'm not being nurturing because I'm using my mindfulness skills, I can look at my rock. It can remind me of what's important to me and how I want to show up with these moments, and then that can guide my behavior. So having something like this, something you can hold, something you could touch, something that you can have readily available could be really helpful. So this is I really enjoy doing these exercises with people. So, yes, so thank you so much for being here. It is such a privilege. Anytime I'm able to share my work with anyone, it is such a privilege. This program is so important to me. And whenever I get the chance to share it, it means so much to me. And I think it's based on acceptance and commitment therapy, positive psychology, self-compassion work. It's based on all things that have evidence and that research has found to be useful. I've just kind of combined the different components into this program that I call Commit to You. And I utilize this program all the time on myself as I try to navigate being an adult, being a human, being a parent. And I do notice those moments, those days where I'm able to utilize these practices, I notice a totally different way of showing up for myself. My mental health is better. And on the flip side, this kind of work does require intention. It's not just our brains, like we've talked about throughout this program. Our brains are prone to notice a negative. Our brains are not programmed easily to notice a positive. But the more we do these practices, the more we integrate them into our lives formally, then through time, our brain will change and our brain will naturally start doing these things, and they will not require that much effort. And it will just be how we're showing up. And the more we can change our brains, the more we have access to change our kids' brains, which will be both their brains and that relationship we have with them can be the foundation that can help them develop healthy lives where they're safe, they're doing what's important to them, they're not abusing substances, they're not making decisions that they can never go back from. Of course, we're all going to have our highs and our lows, and that's what being human is about, and that's the richness of life. But overall, they can still keep moving towards what's important to them. So I am a clinical psychologist, I'm a professor, I own my own business. So if you want to learn more about my program, it's called Commit to You. And my website, committoyou.org, has more information about my work. My name is Dr. Sejal Prajapati, and hopefully somewhere around where this video is, there is a spelling of my name, because it's not the easiest name to spell. So yeah, thank you so much for committing to yourself and for committing to your family and being here. And I hope to meet some of you in person for our in-person programming Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope some of this resonates with you, and I hope it can help you and your family. Thank you.